The diamond bracelet hit the hardwood floor with a sound that seemed to echo forever. Nora stood frozen in the doorway of Victor's study, her hand still extended from where he had torn the gift from her wrist. The bracelet had been his promise to her. Now it lay between them like something dead. "I found everything," Victor said. His voice was quiet, which made it worse. "The messages. The photographs. The account where he has been sending you money for months." Nora's lips parted but no sound emerged. Her other hand moved instinctively to her stomach, pressing against the silk of her blouse, against the secret growing beneath. 8 weeks. She had planned to tell him tonight. She had imagined his joy, his protective embrace, the way his eyes would soften the way they always did when he spoke about wanting children someday. "I do not understand what you are talking about," she finally managed. "Victor, I have not done anything wrong." "Do not." The word struck like a blow. "My sister spent considerable resources investigating you after you refused to sign the property agreement. She discovered exactly what you have been hiding." Behind Victor, in the shadow of the doorway, stood Margot Brennan. Her face was arranged into something resembling concern, but her eyes held a different expression entirely. She clutched a manila folder thick with papers, evidence of crimes Nora had never committed. "Welcome back to another powerful story, my beloved listeners. Kindly tell where you are watching from and what time it is where you are at. If you are new here, prepare for a story of betrayal, unexpected love, and what truly makes a family. Drop everything and listen closely. This tale of heartbreak and redemption might just change how you view love and family forever." The study had always been Nora's favorite room in the estate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the vineyard rows that stretched toward distant mountains. Leather chairs worn soft from generations of use. The scent of old books and wood polish. She had spent countless evenings here with Victor, planning their future, believing she had finally found home after years of having none. Now the room felt like a courtroom. And she was already convicted. "The groundskeeper's son," Margot said, stepping forward with rehearsed efficiency. "Daniel Vance. You have been meeting him in the lower vineyard for months. Accepting payments to his mother's account. The photographs are quite explicit." Nora felt reality fracturing around her like ice cracking beneath her feet. Daniel Vance was 19 years old. She had spoken to him perhaps twice in passing, once about a broken irrigation valve, once to compliment his mother's roses. The accusation was so absurd it took her a moment to process that it was being made seriously. "This is insane," Nora said, her voice rising despite her efforts at control. "Victor, you know me. You know where I am every moment. I manage your hospitality operations. I work 14-hour days. When would I possibly have time to conduct an affair with anyone, let alone a teenager? The evidence is comprehensive." Victor's hand cut through the air, silencing her. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold in a way she had never seen directed at her before. In that moment, he looked exactly like his father in the portrait above the fireplace. Stern. Unyielding. Already certain. Bank records showing deposits to accounts you claimed not to have. Witness statements from 3 different employees who saw you together. Photographs that I can barely stomach looking at. My sister has been thorough. Margot smiled. It was a small thing, barely perceptible, but Nora caught it. And in that smile, she saw something that made her blood run cold. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not protective concern for a brother. This was something else entirely. Nora turned toward Margot directly, meeting her eyes for the first time since this nightmare began. "Why?" Nora asked quietly. "Why would you do this to me?" Margot's polished facade flickered, just for an instant, revealing something raw underneath. Then she composed herself, smoothing her silk blouse with manicured fingers. "Your mother," Margot said, the words precise as surgical instruments, "cost me my engagement 15 years ago when she reported my personal indiscretions to the Harrison family. She was just a housekeeper who should have known her place. Instead, she destroyed my future. My engagement to Thomas Harrison ended because a servant decided she had the right to an opinion about her betters." Nora felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. "Did you think I would forget?" Margot continued. "Did you think there would be no consequences for her daughter daring to insert herself into our family? When I saw how Victor looked at you, when I realized what he was planning, I knew I had to act. Your mother took something precious from me. Now I am simply returning the favor." The revelation struck with physical force. Nora barely remembered her mother mentioning any conflict with a wealthy family. Something about standing up for a young maid who had been mistreated, about reporting what she witnessed to people who needed to know. Her mother had been principled that way, brave in her quiet fashion. She had died 3 years ago, buried in a modest cemetery plot that Nora visited every Sunday. She could not defend herself now. She could not defend her daughter. "You manufactured everything," Nora said, horror spreading through her understanding like ice water in her veins. "Every document, every photograph, every witness statement. All of it fabricated to punish me for something my mother did when I was a child." Margot did not deny it. She did not need to. Her silence was confirmation enough. Nora turned back to Victor, searching his face for any trace of the man who had held her through nightmares, who had whispered promises against her hair, who had talked about building a life together on this land that had been in his family for generations. "Victor," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please. You know who I am. You have known me for 2 years. We have been through everything together. I would never betray you. I would never betray what we have." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or the ghost of the love he had once professed. But then his jaw tightened and his gaze hardened, and Nora watched the man she loved disappear behind a mask of disgust. "I should have known someone like you was too good to be true," Victor said. "A hospitality coordinator from nothing, suddenly indispensable, suddenly intimate with a family like mine. You played the long game beautifully. You almost had me completely fooled." The words landed like blows to her chest. She wanted to scream, to fight, to make him see the truth. But something in his expression told her that no argument she could make would penetrate the certainty his sister had constructed. He had already decided who she was. He had already chosen to believe. "Those babies probably are not even mine," Victor added, his voice thick with contempt. "Given your activities, they could belong to anyone." Nora's hand pressed harder against her stomach. He did not know. He could not know. She had not told anyone about the pregnancy yet, had been saving the news for tonight, for this evening she had planned so carefully. But his words, spoken in cruelty about a hypothetical future, struck at a reality he did not even realize existed. "There are no babies," she said, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. "There is nothing. There never was anything except my love for you," which apparently meant nothing at all. Margot checked her watch, a diamond-encrusted thing that probably cost more than Nora's entire annual salary. "You have 30 minutes, Margot announced. "Collect whatever you can carry and leave. The cottage is estate property. You have no legal claim to anything here." Victor said nothing. He simply stood there, arms crossed, watching Nora as though she were a stranger who had wandered uninvited into his home. "Please," Nora tried one more time. "Just wait. Give me time to prove the truth. Do not throw away everything we built together over lies. Let me show you the evidence is fabricated. Let me find the people your sister paid to create this fiction. Get out of my house." The words were flat, final, devoid of any emotion except cold dismissal. Nora stood frozen for a long moment, her world ending in increments around her. She looked at the study they had decorated together, the desk where she had helped him with correspondence, the window seat where they had watched countless sunsets paint the vineyard gold. Every corner held a memory. Every surface reminded her of a future that had just been murdered. She walked to the cottage on legs that barely functioned. The small house that had been her home for 2 years felt foreign now, hostile, like it belonged to someone else. She grabbed her work bag, a single change of clothes, her wallet, her phone. The photograph of her mother went into the bag. Everything else remained where it was, archaeological evidence of a life that apparently never existed. When she returned to the main house to walk past them to the door, Victor and Margot stood together like executioners watching a condemned woman approach the gallows. Nora walked past them without speaking, past the bracelet still glittering on hardwood, past the man who had just murdered her soul with words. Outside, November had arrived early to this mountain region. The sky hung low and grey, pregnant with the promise of rain. Nora walked down the long driveway, her bag over her shoulder, the estate gates growing closer with each step. Behind her, she heard the front door close. No one called after her. No one asked her to wait, to return, to explain. The gates opened automatically as she approached, then closed behind her with mechanical finality. She stood on the gravel road that wound down the mountain, surrounded by vineyard rows she had come to love, and realized she had nowhere to go. No family. No close friends in this region. No money beyond what sat in her personal checking account, which would cover perhaps 2 months of modest living if she was careful. The first drops of rain began to fall as she started walking. The storm arrived in full force within minutes. November in wine country could be brutal, the mountains funneling weather systems into concentrated fury. Rain fell in sheets so thick Nora could barely see 10 feet ahead. Her jacket soaked through in moments. Her shoes filled with water. The temperature dropped as darkness gathered, and she walked because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and feeling meant acknowledging that everything she had believed about her life was a lie. She made it 4 miles down the mountain road before the pain started. At first she thought it was grief manifesting physically, heartbreak becoming literal. But then she felt the warmth spreading between her legs, different from the rain soaking through her clothes. Felt the contractions seizing her abdomen like fists clenching. Felt her body betraying her in ways she could not control. No. The word emerged as a whisper, then louder. No, no, no. She was 8 weeks pregnant. Too early for labor. Too early for anything except the horrible realization that stress and shock and exposure were triggering something catastrophic. She collapsed against a fence post, her knees buckling, rain streaming down her face and mixing with tears she could no longer contain. The pain intensified. Waves of it, relentless, demanding her attention even as the cold numbed her fingers and her vision began to blur at the edges. Help. She tried to call out, but the word emerged weak, swallowed by the sound of rain hammering against leaves and gravel and her own failing body. Help me. Please. Someone. The darkness at the edges of her vision expanded. The last thing she registered before consciousness slipped away was the headlights of a vehicle cutting through the rain, stopping nearby, and the sound of a car door opening. Then nothing. Walter Kincaid had owned the Valley View Nursery for 43 years, and in all that time, he had never found a pregnant woman collapsed against his fence in a thunderstorm. He was 71 years old, his joints protested every morning, and his doctors kept telling him to retire. But something had made him drive out to check on the greenhouse heating system that evening, something he could not explain even to himself. Providence, perhaps. Or simply the restlessness of a man who had outlived his wife and found the empty farmhouse unbearable after dark. He found her crumpled against his property fence, barely conscious, soaked through, and bleeding in ways that alarmed him deeply. He called emergency services before he even got her into the warm cab of his truck. Then he wrapped his old wool blanket around her shaking shoulders and talked to her, nonsense mostly, just to keep her anchored to consciousness. Stay with me now. Help is coming. You just hold on. She tried to speak, her lips blue with cold, but the words came out garbled, incomprehensible. He caught something that sounded like please and something else that might have been baby. The ambulance arrived in 17 minutes, which felt like 17 hours. Walter insisted on riding along, refusing to let this stranger face whatever came next alone. He had been alone when his Margaret passed, had held her hand in a sterile hospital room while machines beeped out her final heartbeats. No one deserved to face the worst moments of their life without someone beside them. The hospital was chaos and calm in equal measure. Medical personnel moved with urgent efficiency, taking the young woman away on a gurney while Walter answered what questions he could, which were almost none. He did not know her name. He did not know where she came from. He only knew that she had been walking down a mountain road in a deadly storm, alone, pregnant, and clearly in crisis. He waited. The coffee from the vending machine was terrible. The chairs in the waiting room were designed for people with shorter legs. A television mounted in the corner played news that Walter did not absorb. He waited through hours that stretched and compressed unpredictably, watching nurses come and go, watching other families receive news both good and devastating. Finally, near dawn, a doctor emerged and called out for the family of the patient brought in from Valley Road. Walter stood slowly, his back protesting. I am not family. I am the one who found her. Is she going to be all right? The doctor studied him for a moment, clearly weighing patient confidentiality against the practical reality that this old man was the only person who had shown up. She is stable, the doctor said carefully. The baby is alive. A boy. Premature by a significant margin, so he is in the neonatal intensive care unit. He will need to stay for weeks, possibly months. But he is fighting. Both of them are fighting. Walter nodded slowly, relief and concern tangled together in his chest. Does she have anyone I should contact? Anyone who should be here with her? The doctor shook her head. She has not been conscious enough to tell us. We found identification in her bag. Her name is Nora Hensley. No emergency contacts listed. No insurance cards. Just a wallet with about $200 and a photograph of an older woman. Walter looked down at his work-roughened hands, then back at the doctor. Can I see her? When she wakes up, I mean. I do not want her to be alone when she finds out what happened. The doctor's expression softened slightly. That would be kind. She is going to need kindness in the days ahead. Nora woke to white walls and the antiseptic smell of hospital. Her body felt hollow, emptied out, fundamentally different from how it had felt before. For a long moment she could not remember why she was here, could not piece together the fragments of memory floating through her consciousness like debris after an explosion. Then it all came back. Victor's face twisted with disgust. Margot's satisfied smile. The rain. The road. The pain. The baby. She tried to sit up, and her body screamed in protest. A nurse appeared immediately, gentle hands pressing her back against the pillows. Easy now. You have been through a significant trauma. Your body needs rest. My baby. Nora's voice came out cracked, barely recognizable. Is my baby alive? The nurse's expression shifted into something careful, professional, designed to deliver difficult news without making it worse. Your son survived, the nurse said. He is in the neonatal intensive care unit. He was born very early, so he will need to stay here for a while, maybe weeks or months. But he is breathing on his own, and his vital signs are stronger than the doctors expected. He is a fighter. A son. She had a son. Victor had a son. Except Victor would never know, because Victor had thrown her away like garbage, and she would never tell him anything about this child. This baby would never know his father's cruelty. This baby would never feel the rejection that had nearly killed them both. I want to see him, Nora said. Soon. The nurse adjusted something on the foreline. First you need to rest. Your body went through severe shock. The doctors are still monitoring for complications. But I promise, as soon as you are stable enough to move, we will take you to him. A figure appeared in the doorway behind the nurse. An elderly man with a weathered face and kind eyes, twisting a wool cap in his hands. Sorry to intrude, he said. I just wanted to see if you were awake. Make sure you were all right. Nora stared at him, trying to place his face. Something about the voice triggered a fragmented memory. Headlights in the rain. Warm blanket. Words she could not quite recall. You found me, she said slowly. The old man nodded. I am Walter Kincaid. I own the nursery at the bottom of Valley Road. You were collapsed against my fence when I was driving out to check my greenhouses. He shifted his weight awkwardly. I hope you do not mind that I stayed. Just wanted to make sure you had someone here when you woke up. Nora felt tears sliding down her temples, pooling in her hair. She could not remember the last time a stranger had shown her pure kindness without wanting something in return. In the world she had just come from, everything was transaction. Everything was leverage and obligation and keeping careful score. Thank you, she whispered. Walter nodded again, looking uncomfortable with the gratitude. You just focus on getting better. You and that little boy of yours. The rest can wait. She named him Benjamin. Son of my right hand. A name for a fighter, for someone who would have to be strong from his very first breath. She chose it in the NICU, watching through the incubator glass as his tiny chest rose and fell, tubes and monitors making him look more like a science experiment than a baby. But his fingers moved sometimes, grasping at air, and his eyes opened occasionally to reveal dark irises that would probably lighten to hazel as he grew. Victor's eyes had been hazel. Nora pushed that thought away and focused on her son. Walter visited every day. He brought coffee that was marginally better than the vending machine. He brought crossword puzzles to pass the time. He brought quiet company that asked nothing and offered everything. When the hospital social worker started asking difficult questions about Nora's housing situation and support network, Walter was the one who stepped forward with a solution. I have an apartment above my greenhouse, he said. Been empty for years since my last assistant moved on. It is small, but it is warm and dry and private. You can stay there as long as you need. We can work out rent when you are back on your feet. The social worker looked skeptical. Sir, we need to ensure our patient has appropriate resources. She will have them, Walter said firmly. I have a nursery business. I need help. She needs a place. Seems straightforward enough to me. Nora wanted to protest, to insist she could manage on her own, that she had always managed on her own. But the truth was she had $200, no job, no references from her former employer that would not be poisoned by Margot's lies, and a premature infant who would need specialized care for months. Pride was a luxury she could not afford. Thank you, she said again. Walter just shrugged. You remind me of someone, he said. My daughter. She died when she was about your age. Car accident, 20 years back. Never got to see what she would have become. He paused, studying the crossword in his lap. Maybe this is my chance to help someone like her. Maybe that means something. Or maybe it is just an old man with an empty apartment and too much time on his hands. The greenhouse apartment smelled like lavender and growing things. It was small, just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in, but it was warm and clean and safe. Nora brought Benjamin home from the hospital 8 weeks after his premature birth, carrying him up the narrow stairs in a car seat borrowed from the hospital's charity closet. He weighed 5 pounds now, still tiny but no longer terrifyingly fragile. His eyes had indeed lightened to hazel, but Nora chose not to see his father in them. She chose to see only her son, this miracle who had survived against odds that should have been insurmountable. She held him against her chest that first night, feeling his warmth, listening to his breathing, and made vows she would never speak aloud. You will never know weakness like I knew it. You will never depend on anyone who could destroy you the way I was destroyed. You will be strong because I will make you strong. And you will never, ever know the man who threw us away like we were nothing. Something ignited in her chest that night, something that transcended maternal instinct. Fury, perhaps. The kind of fury that does not explode outward in destruction but turns inward, transforming grief into steel. She went back to work 6 weeks later. Walter had offered her a job at the nursery, handling customer service and inventory management. The pay was modest, but the hours were flexible enough to accommodate Benjamin's needs. More importantly, it was a start. A foundation on which to build something new. She worked from dawn until Benjamin's afternoon nap, then returned after dinner for evening greenhouse maintenance. She learned the names of plants, the chemistry of soil, the particular needs of each species in Walter's collection. She discovered she had an aptitude for understanding what growing things required, for diagnosing problems before they became catastrophes, for coaxing life from situations that seemed hopeless. At night, after Benjamin was asleep, she studied. Agricultural extension courses at first, available online through the state university. Then more advanced coursework in plant pathology, soil science, viticulture. The vineyard that had expelled her had also given her knowledge, hours of conversation with groundskeepers and agronomists who had been happy to explain their work to the boss's girlfriend. That knowledge became her weapon now. That knowledge would be the foundation of her survival. Walter watched her work with a mix of admiration and concern. You are running yourself ragged, he observed one evening, finding her still awake at midnight with textbooks spread across the apartment's tiny table. I am building something, she replied without looking up. I do not have time to rest. Building what, exactly? A life that no one can take away from me. A future that does not depend on anyone else's approval or support. A version of myself that is untouchable. Walter was quiet for a moment, considering her words. And what about him? He gestured toward the crib where Benjamin slept. What are you building for him? Everything I never had. Security. Education. Opportunity. He will never have to be afraid the way I was afraid. Walter nodded slowly. Just make sure you are not so busy building walls that you forget to build doors. A fortress can protect you, but it can also become a prison. Nora did not respond. She was already back to studying, memorizing the Latin names of fungal pathogens, preparing for an exam that would move her one step closer to the credentials she needed. The years passed in a blur of exhaustion and achievement. Benjamin took his first steps in the greenhouse, wobbling between rows of seedlings while Walter cheered and Nora captured the moment on her phone. He spoke his first word 3 months later, a garbled approximation of Walter's name that delighted the old man more than he wanted to admit. Nora finished her extension courses with perfect marks. She enrolled in advanced certification programs, traveling when necessary for intensive workshops, leaving Benjamin with Walter, who had become something between grandfather and guardian angel. She published her first article in an agricultural journal during Benjamin's second year, a technical analysis of soil remediation techniques that attracted attention from practitioners across the industry. By Benjamin's third birthday, she had established herself as a serious voice in vineyard restoration. Desperate property owners sought her out after reading her work, hoping she could save failing operations that others had given up on. She developed treatment protocols that worked where standard approaches failed. She built a reputation for solving impossible problems. The consulting firm came next, launched from Walter's greenhouse office with 1 employee and 0 clients. Within a year, she had more work than she could handle alone. Within 2 years, she employed a team of 4 specialists and maintained contracts with vineyards across 3 states. Within 3 years, she purchased a Victorian farmhouse on 20 acres of land outside town, with a separate cottage where Walter could live rent-free for the rest of his life. She had become exactly what she promised herself she would be: untouchable, successful, beyond the reach of anyone who might try to destroy her again. But somewhere along the way, she had also become something else. Something she did not recognize until Walter finally spoke directly about it. Benjamin was 4 years old, bright and curious, and increasingly aware that other children had different kinds of families. He had started asking questions about his father, questions Nora deflected with careful non-answers that seemed to satisfy him for now. But the questions themselves revealed something about his experience that Nora had not wanted to see. "You hug him like you are afraid he will break," Walter observed one evening after Benjamin had gone to bed. Nora looked up from her laptop, where she was reviewing soil samples for a new client. "I beg your pardon. When you hold that boy, you are stiff. Careful. Like you are performing a duty rather than expressing love." Walter's voice was gentle but unwavering. "He notices, Nora. Children always notice. I love my son. I know you do. But love and the expression of love are not the same thing. You have built something remarkable here. Your business, your reputation, your security. But you have also built walls around yourself that even Benjamin cannot breach. He is growing up watching his mother maintain distance from everything, including him." Nora's hands stilled on the keyboard. "I am protecting him. By being strong, by being successful, I am giving him a foundation that cannot be destroyed. You are teaching him that love requires walls. That affection is dangerous. That needing someone makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability is shameful." Walter leaned forward. "Is that really the lesson you want him to learn?" Nora had no answer. She closed her laptop and walked to Benjamin's room, standing in the doorway watching him sleep. His face was peaceful, his small hands curled on the pillow. He looked so much like Victor sometimes that it stole her breath. But he was not Victor. He was his own person, innocent of his father's choices, deserving of more than a mother who protected him from everything, including herself. She crossed to his bed and sat on the edge, something she rarely did after he fell asleep. She stroked his hair, letting herself feel the softness of it, the warmth of him. "I am trying," she whispered. "I am trying so hard to keep you safe. But maybe I have forgotten that safety is not the same as love." Benjamin stirred slightly but did not wake. Nora stayed there for a long time, beginning the slow work of dismantling walls she had not realized she was building. 300 miles away, Victor Brennan sat alone in his study with a glass of scotch and the growing certainty that something in his life had gone terribly wrong. The vineyard was dying. It had started slowly, almost imperceptibly. A section of vines showing stress in their 3rd year after Nora's departure. Yellow leaves where green should have been. Fruit that failed to develop properly. The estate manager had assured him it was a minor issue, easily addressed with adjusted irrigation and soil amendments. But the issue had spread. Now, 4 years after Victor had thrown Nora out into a storm, 80% of his producing acreage showed signs of infection. The blight had progressed beyond anything his consultants had seen before, resistant to standard treatments, spreading through root systems that had been healthy for generations. The Brennan legacy, 4 generations of winemaking tradition, was crumbling before his eyes. Victor drained his scotch and poured another. The study that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a mausoleum. Everything reminded him of her. The window seat where she used to read. The corner of the desk where she would perch while he worked. The particular way she had arranged the books on the shelves, organized by subject rather than size the way his mother had always insisted. He had tried to forget her. He had dated appropriate women from appropriate families, women Margot approved of, women who understood the social expectations of his world. None of them made him laugh the way Nora had. None of them argued with him about philosophy or challenged his assumptions about the business. None of them looked at him like he was worth believing in. He had told himself that proved nothing. He had told himself that the absence of connection with these women simply meant he had not found the right one yet. He had told himself that throwing Nora away had been the right decision, the necessary decision, the decision that protected his family from contamination. But the certainty he had felt that night had eroded over time, worn away by small moments of doubt that accumulated like sediment at the bottom of a river. The way Margot had smiled when delivering the evidence. The way the evidence itself had been too comprehensive, too perfectly damning, too conveniently assembled. The way Nora had looked at him at the end, not with anger but with bewildered devastation, like she genuinely could not understand what was happening. What if she had been telling the truth? He had never allowed himself to fully form that question before. He had pushed it away every time it surfaced, burying it under justifications and rationalizations and the continued insistence of his sister that he had done the right thing. But the vineyard was dying. His life felt hollow. And the question refused to stay buried any longer. He reached for his phone and made a call he should have made years ago. The private investigator was a woman named Diane Chen, recommended by his attorney for her discretion and thoroughness. Victor explained what he wanted in broad terms. He needed to understand what had happened to his family's estate, why the blight had taken hold so aggressively, whether there were operational failures or personnel issues that might explain the decline. And there is someone, he added carefully. A woman who worked here 4 years ago. Nora Hensley. I want to know what happened to her after she left. Diane's voice on the phone was professionally neutral. Any particular reason you are interested in this woman? Personal reasons. Victor hesitated. I need to know if the circumstances of her departure might be relevant to what is happening now. It was a flimsy excuse and he knew it. But Diane did not press further. She named her fee, set a timeline for preliminary findings, and ended the call with crisp efficiency. Victor sat in the study long after hanging up, staring at the vineyard rows visible through the window. The vines closest to the house were the worst affected, leaves withered and brown, fruit rotting on stems. His great-grandfather had planted those vines. His grandfather had expanded them. His father had built them into an operation worth millions. And Victor was watching them die. Margot called the next morning, her voice carrying the particular brightness that always preceded requests for money or favors. I heard about the blight situation, she said. Such a shame. But you know, Thomas Harrison has been asking about me again. After all these years. Is it not wonderful? I was thinking a celebration might be in order. Victor listened to his sister discuss dinner reservations and old social connections, hearing for the first time the complete absence of concern for his crisis. The vineyard was failing, the family legacy was crumbling, and Margot wanted to discuss her romantic prospects. I need to go, he said, cutting her off mid-sentence. But we have not finished discussing the Harrison situation. We are finished. He ended the call and sat with the uncomfortable realization that he could not remember the last time a conversation with his sister had left him feeling anything except drained. Diane Chen delivered her preliminary findings 6 weeks later. She arrived at the estate in a practical sedan, carrying a leather case that contained a folder Victor was not prepared for. They sat in the study, the same room where everything had unraveled 4 years ago, and Diane laid out her discoveries with clinical precision. Your blight appears to have started in the northeast section, she began, spreading maps and soil reports across the desk. The initial infection was likely present before you noticed symptoms. Standard treatments failed because this is not a standard pathogen. It is an unusual hybrid that requires specialized intervention. There is only one expert in the region who has successfully treated comparable cases. Victor leaned forward. Who? Diane paused, her expression shifting slightly. That brings me to the other portion of my investigation. The woman you asked me to find. Nora Hensley. She is alive and quite successful. She has established herself as one of the foremost vineyard restoration consultants on the West Coast. Her company specializes in exactly the kind of crisis you are facing. Victor felt the blood drain from his face. There is more, Diane continued, opening another section of her folder. You asked me to investigate operational issues that might explain the estate's decline. In doing so, I found it necessary to revisit the circumstances of Ms. Hensley's departure. I have uncovered significant irregularities in the evidence that was presented against her. What kind of irregularities? Diane met his eyes directly. The kind that suggests the evidence was entirely fabricated. Purchased witnesses. Digitally altered photographs. Bank accounts created specifically to simulate transfers that never actually occurred. The paper trail leads to your sister's personal finances. Large payments to a private firm that specializes in manufacturing documentation for legal cases. Victor's hands had begun to shake. He pressed them flat against the desk to still them. You are telling me that everything Margot showed me, the proof of Nora's affair, all of it was fake? I am telling you that my investigation has found no credible evidence supporting any of the claims made against Ms. Hensley. What I have found instead is extensive evidence that your sister hired professionals to construct a false case against an innocent woman. Diane's voice remained level, but something in her eyes suggested she understood the weight of what she was delivering. There is one more thing you need to know. She slid a final document across the desk. Hospital records, Victor saw. Admission forms and medical charts. Ms. Hensley was found collapsed on Valley Road the night you asked her to leave. She was in premature labor. She had been walking in the storm for approximately 4 miles. Victor could not move. Could not breathe. She was pregnant, Diane said quietly. She gave birth to a son that night. The child survived, though he spent weeks in neonatal intensive care. His name is Benjamin. He is now 4 years old. The words hung in the air between them, devastating in their simplicity. Victor stared at the hospital documents, seeing dates and medical terminology that blurred into meaninglessness. Only one fact penetrated the fog of his shock. Nora had been pregnant when he threw her out. She had been carrying his child, and he had expelled her into a deadly storm based on lies his sister had manufactured. She had nearly died. The baby had nearly died. And Victor had spent 4 years convincing himself he had done the right thing. The paternity, he managed. Is the child, is he certain to be mine? Diane's expression was careful. The birth records list the father as unknown. Ms. Hensley has never publicly identified the father, and she has not sought child support or any contact with your family. However, given the timeline and circumstances, the biological connection seems highly probable. Victor pushed back from the desk and walked to the window. The dying vineyard stretched before him, rows of withered vines testament to his failures. But the vines seemed suddenly insignificant compared to the larger destruction his certainty had caused. He had a son. A 4-year-old boy he had never met, would never have known about if not for this investigation. A child who had grown up without a father because Victor had been too weak to question his sister's lies. I need to see her, he said without turning from the window. Nora. I need to explain what happened. I need to tell her I know the truth. Diane was quiet for a moment. I should tell you that my investigation indicates Ms. Hensley has built a successful life entirely independent of any connection to you or your family. She owns property. She runs a thriving business. She appears to be raising her son competently with the help of an elderly man who took her in after she was found on the road. She has given no indication of wanting contact with you. Victor turned to face the investigator. Does she know that I did not know? That I genuinely believed the evidence against her? I cannot speak to what she knows or believes about your motivations. I can only tell you what my investigation uncovered. Diane began gathering her materials. I will email you the full report. You should probably have your attorney review it, particularly the sections documenting your sister's activities. There may be legal implications. After she left, Victor sat alone in the study until darkness fell around him. He did not turn on lights. He did not pour himself a drink. He simply sat with the weight of understanding that he had destroyed an innocent woman based on his sister's manufactured vengeance. She had been pregnant. She had nearly died. The son she carried was probably his. And the only person who might be able to save his vineyard was the woman he had thrown away like she was worthless. He reached for his phone and typed Nora's company name into the search engine. The website that appeared was professional, competent, exactly what he would have expected from the woman he once thought he knew. Her photograph showed someone transformed, the warmth he remembered replaced by something harder, more guarded. She looked like a woman who had learned that the world could not be trusted. He had taught her that lesson. He had been the one to shatter her belief in love and safety and the possibility of happiness. Every wall she had built, every defense she had constructed, existed because of what he had done to her. Victor set down his phone and pressed his hands against his eyes, trying to contain the grief and regret that threatened to overwhelm him. Tomorrow he would begin making calls. He would sever his relationship with Margot completely. He would consult with attorneys about documenting her fraud. He would reach out to Nora's company through official channels, requesting a consultation about his vineyard's crisis. And somehow, impossibly, he would find a way to face the woman whose life he had destroyed. He would find a way to beg for a forgiveness he knew he did not deserve. The letter arrived at Nora's office on a Tuesday afternoon, unremarkable among dozens of consultation requests that flooded her inbox every week. Her assistant flagged it for priority review based on the scope and urgency described. Not knowing the sender's name would detonate like a bomb. Brennan Estate, the header read. Urgent vineyard restoration consultation. Nora stared at the words for a long moment, her coffee growing cold in her hand. Then she set down the cup, closed her office door, and read the formal request 3 times before she trusted herself to respond. The letter was professionally written, probably by Victor's estate manager or attorney. It described the blight in clinical terms, detailed the failed interventions, acknowledged that her firm's expertise represented perhaps the only remaining hope for salvaging the operation. Nothing personal. Nothing acknowledging their history. Just a business proposal from a property in crisis. But she knew. She knew Victor must have learned the truth, or at least suspected it, because no other explanation made sense for why he would reach out to her specifically. He had thrown her away like contamination. He would not be requesting her help now unless something fundamental had shifted in his understanding. Part of her wanted to refuse immediately. To delete the request, block the sender, pretend the Brennan estate had ceased to exist the moment its gates closed behind her. That part of her still trembled sometimes, late at night, remembering the rain and the road and the terrible certainty that she was going to die. But another part of her recognized something in this moment. An opportunity, perhaps. Not for revenge, which had never been what she wanted, but for something harder to name. Closure, maybe. Or proof that she had survived not just as a broken thing limping along but as something stronger than she had been before. She called Walter that evening, after Benjamin was in bed. Brennan Estate wants to hire me, she said without preamble. Walter was quiet for a long moment. The same Brennan Estate that threw you out in a storm while you were pregnant with their heir. The same one. Their vineyards are failing. 80% blight coverage. They have tried everything else. And what are you thinking about doing? Nora looked out her window at the property she had purchased with money she earned through her own expertise. The Victorian farmhouse that was hers alone. The life she had built from absolute nothing. I am thinking that I spent 4 years becoming someone no one could destroy. Maybe it is time to find out if that is actually true. Walter's voice was careful when he responded. Are you sure this is about proving something to yourself? Or is it about something else? I do not know, Nora admitted. That is what I need to figure out. 2 weeks later, she walked into a conference room in a neutral business center, flanked by her associate and her attorney, prepared to face the man who had murdered her trust in love itself. Victor was already seated when she arrived, and the sight of him created a reaction she had not prepared for. He looked diminished. Thinner than she remembered, grey at the temples, his posture carrying a weariness that spoke of sleepless nights and crushing weight. His eyes met hers across the conference table, and something detonated silently in the space between them. Recognition. Regret. A desperate hope he was too proud or too ashamed to voice. Nora allowed nothing to show on her face. She had learned to hide behind professionalism the way soldiers learn to hide behind armor. She sat down, opened her folder, and began discussing treatment protocols in the same tone she would use with any failing vineyard owner. Mr. Brennan, she said, and watched him flinch at the formal address. I understand you are experiencing significant blight damage across your producing acreage. My team has reviewed the preliminary information your estate manager provided. The situation is serious but not necessarily irreversible. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Victor participated when required, answered questions about irrigation systems and previous treatments, provided access information for site visits. But his attention remained fixed on Nora throughout, cataloguing the changes in her, the transformation from the warm woman he once knew into this controlled professional. She refused to acknowledge his attention. She maintained perfect distance, perfect composure, perfect demonstration that he had no power over her anymore. When the formal portion concluded and her associate stepped out to make a phone call, Victor remained seated. His hands were clasped on the table, his knuckles white with tension. "Nora," he said quietly, "Ms. Hensley is fine for our professional interactions." Victor nodded slowly, accepting the correction. "I know the truth," he said. "About Margot. About what she did to you. I hired an investigator to understand why the estate was failing, and he discovered everything. The fabricated evidence. The paid witnesses. The accounts she created to simulate transfers." Nora's hands stilled on her papers, but her expression remained neutral. "I am not sure why you believe this information is relevant to vineyard restoration. Because I need you to understand that I did not know." Victor's voice cracked slightly. "When I accused you, when I threw you out, I genuinely believed the evidence was real. I was wrong to believe without questioning, wrong to trust my sister over you, wrong about everything. But I did not know it was all manufactured." Nora stood, gathering her materials. "Your self-awareness is admirable, Mr. Brennan. It does not, however, obligate me to provide emotional absolution along with agricultural consultation. If you are interested in proceeding with treatment protocols for your vineyard, my office will be in contact about next steps. If you are looking for forgiveness, I suggest a therapist." She walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the floor with rhythmic certainty. "I know about Benjamin," Victor said to her, retreating back. Nora stopped. Her hand was on the door handle. She did not turn around. "The investigator found the hospital records from the night you left. You were pregnant. You nearly died. The baby nearly died. He is 4 years old now, and he is probably my son." The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of grief and anger and the terrible weight of what could not be undone. When Nora finally spoke, her voice was ice. "His name is Benjamin. He is intelligent and kind and completely unaware that his biological father threw his mother into a storm without caring whether either of them survived. That ignorance is the greatest gift I can give him. Do not contact me about anything except vineyard restoration. Do not attempt to reach my son. Do not imagine that knowing the truth now changes anything about what you did then." She opened the door and walked out, leaving Victor alone with the magnitude of his destruction. The drive home from that conference room took Nora through wine country she had once loved, past vineyards that reminded her of everything she had lost and everything she had rebuilt. Her hands were steady on the steering wheel. Her breathing was controlled. But something beneath her professional composure had cracked, and she could feel the fractures spreading. He knew about Benjamin. She had prepared for many possibilities when she agreed to this consultation. She had prepared for his arrogance, his denial, his attempts to rewrite history. She had not prepared for his devastation. She had not prepared for the broken way he said her son's name, like the word itself was a wound he could not stop touching. When she arrived home, Walter was in the kitchen making dinner while Benjamin drew pictures at the table. The domestic normalcy of the scene struck her with unexpected force. This was what she had built. This was what she was protecting. This small, safe world where no one could hurt them. "Mommy." Benjamin looked up with a smile that still had the power to undo her. "I drew a picture of our garden. See, there is Walter's tomatoes and my sunflower and the big tree where the birds live." Nora crossed to the table and looked at her son's artwork. The colors were bright, the proportions cheerful chaos, the joy evident in every crayon stroke. She thought about Victor's eyes across that conference table, hungry and desperate and too late. "It is beautiful," she said. "Tell me about the birds." Benjamin launched into an elaborate explanation of the bird family he had invented, complete with names and personalities and a complex social structure that apparently involved disputes over the best branches. Nora listened, asking questions, trying to be present in the way Walter had encouraged her to practice. But part of her mind remained in that conference room, replaying Victor's words, examining them for manipulation or performance. She found neither. What she found instead was genuine anguish, which was somehow worse. After Benjamin was in bed, Walter poured them both tea and sat across from her at the kitchen table. "How did it go?" he asked. Nora wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting the heat ground her. "He knows about Benjamin. He hired an investigator to look into his estate's problems, and the investigator found hospital records from the night I left. He knows I was pregnant. He knows Benjamin exists." Walter's expression remained calm, unsurprised. "And how did he react to this knowledge?" "He looked destroyed." Nora heard the confusion in her own voice. "He said he did not know the evidence against me was fabricated. He said he genuinely believed his sister's lies. He apologized and seemed to mean it." "Do you believe him?" Nora considered the question carefully. "I believe he did not know his sister manufactured everything. That part seems genuine. But believing lies about someone you claim to love, that is a choice. He could have questioned. He could have investigated before throwing me away. He chose certainty over curiosity because certainty was easier." Walter nodded slowly. "And now? What happens next?" "I agreed to consult on his vineyard restoration. Professional engagement only." He signed documents agreeing to maintain distance and make no claims on Benjamin. Nora sipped her tea. "Part of me wanted to refuse. To let his precious family legacy rot in the ground as punishment for what he did to us." "But you did not refuse." "No. Because the vineyard is an interesting agricultural challenge. Because my reputation benefits from high-profile restorations. Because I spent 4 years becoming someone who makes decisions based on strategy, not emotion." Walter was quiet for a moment. "Those are all excellent professional reasons. Are there personal ones as well?" Nora set down her cup. "I do not know. That is what frightens me. I do not know what I want from this situation. I do not know if I want him to suffer or change or disappear. I do not know if I am strong enough to face him regularly without it costing me something I cannot afford to lose." Walter reached across the table and covered her hand with his weathered one. "You are stronger than you realize. But strength does not mean invulnerability. It means surviving what hurts and learning from it. Whatever you decide about Victor Brennan, make sure you are deciding for yourself and for Benjamin, not just reacting to old pain." Nora nodded, though she was not certain she knew how to tell the difference anymore. The restoration work began 3 weeks later. Nora arrived at the Brennan estate on a December morning, frost silvering the damaged vineyard rows. The property looked both familiar and foreign, the bones unchanged but the health catastrophically different. She walked the affected areas with her associate, collecting soil samples, documenting symptoms, building treatment protocols in her mind. Victor followed at respectful distance, answering questions when asked, providing access without presumption. He did not attempt personal conversation. He did not reference their history or the revelations from the conference room. He simply cooperated with professional efficiency, treating her exactly as she had demanded to be treated. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like something else she could not name. "The blight is extensive but not irreversible," she told him at the end of that first assessment. "The intervention will require approximately 3 years of intensive management, followed by ongoing maintenance protocols. I can outline projected costs if you want to proceed." "Whatever it takes," Victor said quietly. "Whatever the cost." Nora met his eyes directly for the first time since her arrival. "I want to be absolutely clear about something. I am doing this because these vineyards represent agricultural heritage worth preserving. I am doing this because my professional reputation benefits from successful high-profile restorations. I am not doing this for you. I am not doing this because I have forgiven you or because I see any possibility of personal reconciliation. The man who threw me out while I carried his child does not deserve my consideration. The vineyards he inherited might." Victor nodded slowly. "I understand." "Do you?" "Because Benjamin exists in a world completely separate from anything involving you. He knows nothing about his biological origins, and I intend to maintain that separation until he is old enough to make informed decisions about what information he wants. That might be when he is 18. That might be never. You have no voice in that timeline." "I understand," Victor repeated. "And I accept those terms completely." The restoration proceeded over months that became seasons. Nora's treatment protocols worked as designed, the blight retreating incrementally, healthy growth emerging from carefully managed soil. She visited quarterly for assessment, maintaining the professional distance that had become her armor. Victor proved surprisingly capable of respecting boundaries. He asked no personal questions. He made no attempts to discuss their past or imagine their future. He focused entirely on implementing her recommendations, on learning the science behind her methods, on becoming a competent steward of the recovery process. She observed his transformation without acknowledging it. The weight he had lost during his initial crisis began returning. His posture straightened as the vineyard improved. He spoke with growing confidence about soil chemistry and disease management, concepts he had clearly never engaged with before this disaster forced his education. But she also heard things through the agricultural community's informal networks. Victor had sold several valuable family assets and donated the proceeds to organizations supporting single mothers in crisis. He had enrolled in restorative justice programs, attending workshops on accountability and making amends. He had written articles for industry publications about the dangers of inherited assumptions and the importance of questioning family loyalty when it conflicted with ethics. He had completely severed his relationship with Margot. Their sister had been removed from all inheritance documentation, banned from estate property, cut off from the family resources she had always assumed were her birthright. Nora processed these reports without allowing them to affect her professional interactions. People could perform transformation without actually changing. Public gestures of accountability might be genuine or might be strategic positioning for some future appeal. She had learned too well how completely someone could deceive her about their true nature. Still, she could not entirely dismiss the accumulating evidence that Victor was becoming someone different from the man who had destroyed her. The confrontation with Margot came 6 months into the restoration process. Nora was in her office reviewing soil reports when her assistant appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "There is a woman here demanding to see you. She does not have an appointment, but she says it is urgent family business. Her name is Margot Brennan." Nora's hands stilled on her keyboard. For a moment, she considered refusing the meeting, having security escort Margot from the building. But something in her recognized that this confrontation was inevitable, had been building since the moment Victor reached out for help. Better to face it on her terms, in her territory. "Send her in," Nora said. "And stay within earshot." Margot entered the office like she owned it, her designer clothes and diamond jewelry announcing wealth before words became necessary. She looked older than Nora remembered, lines around her eyes that makeup could not quite conceal, a tightness in her expression that suggested constant dissatisfaction. "So this is what you have become," Margot said, surveying the office with barely concealed contempt. "A farmer with delusions of importance. How quaint." Nora did not stand. She remained behind her desk, hands folded, expression neutral. "Ms. Brennan, I was not aware we had business to discuss." Margot sat without invitation, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "I came to congratulate you on your little scheme. You managed to position yourself exactly where you needed to be, close enough to my brother during his crisis to offer salvation. Very strategic. I underestimated your long-term planning abilities. I have no idea what you are talking about. I think you engineered this entire situation." Margot's voice remained pleasant, but venom glittered beneath the surface. "The blight, the desperation, Victor's sudden need for your particular expertise. Quite a coincidence that you happen to be the only person who can save our family legacy." Nora almost laughed. The accusation was so absurd, so completely detached from reality, that it revealed more about Margot's psychology than any confession could. "You believe I engineered agricultural disease to create leverage against your family. That I somehow anticipated needing this position 4 years in advance. I believe you are an opportunist who saw a chance for revenge or resources or both. Victor is weak. Always has been. Emotional, susceptible to manipulation. He has convinced himself he wronged you when he simply made a prudent decision to eliminate an unsuitable partner." Nora leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto Margot with predatory focus. "Let me clarify something for you since you seem confused. I do not want your brother. I do not want your family money. I do not want anything from any of you except permanent absence from my son's life. Victor needed my expertise, and I agreed to provide it because I am a professional and his vineyard represents interesting work. That is the beginning and end of the story. Then why all the restrictions?" Margot pressed. "Why the legal documents preventing him from acknowledging his own child? Sounds like control to me." Sounds like someone positioning for future demands. Nora stood, moving around her desk with deliberate slowness. She planted her hands on the edge and leaned toward Margot with an expression that could have frozen sunlight. Those restrictions exist because of you. Because you manufactured evidence to destroy an innocent woman who had done nothing except fall in love with your brother. Because you waited 15 years to punish me for something my dead mother did when I was a child. Because your fabrications nearly killed me and my son, and I will never let either of us anywhere near your family's toxic influence again. Margot's composure cracked slightly, a muscle jumping in her jaw. I protected my family. You destroyed one, Nora corrected. Mine. For petty revenge based on wounded pride. You are not protective, Ms. Brennan. You are vindictive and pathetic and so desperate to maintain control that you would sacrifice anyone to preserve your illusions. Margot stood as well, drawing herself up with offended dignity. You think you have won something. You think you have risen above your station and proven yourself. But you are still the housekeeper's daughter who tried to infiltrate her betters. Victor may have momentary guilt, but eventually he will remember who he is and where he comes from. He will rebuild his life with appropriate people, and you will return to the obscurity you deserve. Nora moved to her office door and opened it, the gesture unmistakable. This conversation is finished. Leave my building. If you contact me again, if you come near my son, if you make any attempt to interfere in our lives, I will destroy what remains of your reputation with documented evidence of everything you did 4 years ago. Margot's eyes widened slightly. You are threatening me. I am explaining consequences. I have the investigator's report detailing every fraudulent document you created. I have traced the payments from your accounts to the people you hired. I have witness statements ready to submit to authorities if necessary. You manufactured evidence for use in what could have become legal proceedings. That is criminal fraud. I suggest you consider very carefully whether your wounded pride is worth a prosecution. Margot walked to the door, her earlier confidence evaporated. Victor does not need to know about this visit. He is under considerable stress already. Victor already knows exactly what you are. Nora's voice was ice. He hired the same investigator who discovered your fabrications. He knows everything, and that knowledge is eating him alive in ways I find deeply satisfying. Now leave. After Margot was gone, Nora returned to her desk and sat heavily. Her hands trembled slightly despite her maintained composure during the confrontation. Facing Margot had required more energy than she anticipated, stirring up emotions she had worked hard to bury. She pressed her palms against her eyes, breathing deeply, reconstructing the walls that felt suddenly fragile. Her phone buzzed. A message from Victor. I just heard from Margot. She called screaming about a confrontation at your office. I am calling to apologize for her behavior and to promise she will not bother you again. I should have anticipated she would try something like this. Nora typed a brief response. Your promises mean nothing. Your family is your responsibility. Keep her away from me and my son. Victor's reply came immediately. I have already filed for a restraining order. She is legally barred from contacting you or coming within 500 feet of your property. I should have done this years ago. I am sorry I did not. Nora stared at the message for a long moment, uncertain what to do with this evidence of action rather than words. Then she set down her phone and returned to her soil reports, determined to focus on work she could control. The music box arrived on Benjamin's 5th birthday. It appeared on Nora's porch in simple brown wrapping, no card, no return address. Benjamin discovered it while retrieving the morning newspaper, carrying it inside with the excited curiosity of a child on his birthday. Mommy, there is a present. Can I open it now? Nora looked at the package with immediate suspicion. She knew who had sent it without needing confirmation. But Benjamin was already tearing at the paper, and she did not have the heart to snatch away what he believed was a birthday gift. Inside was a music box, handcrafted from polished cherry wood, its surface smooth and perfectly finished. A small carved bird perched on top, wings spread as if about to take flight. Benjamin turned the key, and music began to play. Nora's breath stopped. The melody was one she had hummed constantly during her pregnancy, a lullaby her own mother had sung to her as a child. She had not consciously remembered sharing this with Victor, but somewhere in the fog of those early months together, she must have hummed it while he was near. And he had remembered. Listen, Mommy. Benjamin's face was illuminated with delight. It sounds like the song you sing when I cannot sleep. Nora's throat tightened. She took the music box from Benjamin's hands, examining it for any identifying marks, finding none. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly custom work. Someone had spent considerable time and money creating this specific gift. Do you like it? Benjamin asked anxiously, misreading her expression. Nora forced herself to smile. It is beautiful. Do you like it? I love it. Can I keep it in my room? I can listen to it when I have bad dreams. Of course you can. She let Benjamin take the music box upstairs while she stood in the kitchen, processing what had just happened. Victor had sent a gift that demonstrated intimate knowledge of her history, of the songs that comforted her, of the things that mattered. He had done so anonymously, making no demands, expecting no acknowledgement. Just a gift from the shadows, a gesture of connection he knew he had no right to claim. Walter appeared in the doorway, having watched the scene unfold. You know who sent it, he said. Yes. Are you angry? Nora considered the question carefully. I do not know what I am. He remembered something I did not know he noticed. He sent something meaningful without asking for credit. That is not the behavior of someone performing transformation for personal gain. It might be the behavior of someone genuinely trying to change, Walter suggested gently. Or it might be manipulation I cannot recognize because I still do not understand what he wants. What if what he wants is simply to give his son a birthday gift without being able to be present? I believe you are an opportunist who saw a chance for revenge or resources or both. Victor is weak. Always has been. Emotional, susceptible to manipulation. He has convinced himself he wronged you when he simply made a prudent decision to eliminate an unsuitable partner. Nora leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto Margot with predatory focus. Let me clarify something for you since you seem confused. I do not want your brother. I do not want your family money. I do not want anything from any of you except permanent absence from my son's life. Victor needed my expertise, and I agreed to provide it because I am a professional and his vineyard represents interesting work. That is the beginning and end of the story. Then why all the restrictions? Margot pressed. Why the legal documents preventing him from acknowledging his own child? Sounds like control to me. Sounds like someone positioning for future demands. Nora stood, moving around her desk with deliberate slowness. She planted her hands on the edge and leaned toward Margot with an expression that could have frozen sunlight. Those restrictions exist because of you. Because you manufactured evidence to destroy an innocent woman who had done nothing except fall in love with your brother. Because you waited 15 years to punish me for something my dead mother did when I was a child. Because your fabrications nearly killed me and my son, and I will never let either of us anywhere near your family's toxic influence again. Margot's composure cracked slightly, a muscle jumping in her jaw. I protected my family. You destroyed one, Nora corrected. Mine. For petty revenge based on wounded pride. You are not protective, Ms. Brennan. You are vindictive and pathetic and so desperate to maintain control that you would sacrifice anyone to preserve your illusions. Margot stood as well, drawing herself up with offended dignity. You think you have won something. You think you have risen above your station and proven yourself. But you are still the housekeeper's daughter who tried to infiltrate her betters. Victor may have momentary guilt, but eventually he will remember who he is and where he comes from. He will rebuild his life with appropriate people, and you will return to the obscurity you deserve. Nora moved to her office door and opened it, the gesture unmistakable. This conversation is finished. Leave my building. If you contact me again, if you come near my son, if you make any attempt to interfere in our lives, I will destroy what remains of your reputation with documented evidence of everything you did 4 years ago. Margot's eyes widened slightly. You are threatening me. I am explaining consequences. I have the investigator's report detailing every fraudulent document you created. I have traced the payments from your accounts to the people you hired. I have witness statements ready to submit to authorities if necessary. You manufactured evidence for use in what could have become legal proceedings. That is criminal fraud. I suggest you consider very carefully whether your wounded pride is worth a prosecution. Margot walked to the door, her earlier confidence evaporated. Victor does not need to know about this visit. He is under considerable stress already. Victor already knows exactly what you are. Nora's voice was ice. He hired the same investigator who discovered your fabrications. He knows everything, and that knowledge is eating him alive in ways I find deeply satisfying. Now leave. After Margot was gone, Nora returned to her desk and sat heavily. Her hands trembled slightly despite her maintained composure during the confrontation. Facing Margot had required more energy than she anticipated, stirring up emotions she had worked hard to bury. She pressed her palms against her eyes, breathing deeply, reconstructing the walls that felt suddenly fragile. Her phone buzzed. A message from Victor. I just heard from Margot. She called screaming about a confrontation at your office. I am calling to apologize for her behavior and to promise she will not bother you again. I should have anticipated she would try something like this. Nora typed a brief response. Your promises mean nothing. Your family is your responsibility. Keep her away from me and my son. Victor's reply came immediately. I have already filed for a restraining order. She is legally barred from contacting you or coming within 500 feet of your property. I should have done this years ago. I am sorry I did not. Nora stared at the message for a long moment, uncertain what to do with this evidence of action rather than words. Then she set down her phone and returned to her soil reports, determined to focus on work she could control. The music box arrived on Benjamin's 5th birthday. It appeared on Nora's porch in simple brown wrapping, no card, no return address. Benjamin discovered it while retrieving the morning newspaper, carrying it inside with the excited curiosity of a child on his birthday. Mommy, there is a present. Can I open it now? Nora looked at the package with immediate suspicion. She knew who had sent it without needing confirmation. But Benjamin was already tearing at the paper, and she did not have the heart to snatch away what he believed was a birthday gift. Inside was a music box, handcrafted from polished cherry wood, its surface smooth and perfectly finished. A small carved bird perched on top, wings spread as if about to take flight. Benjamin turned the key, and music began to play. Nora's breath stopped. The melody was one she had hummed constantly during her pregnancy, a lullaby her own mother had sung to her as a child. She had not consciously remembered sharing this with Victor, but somewhere in the fog of those early months together, she must have hummed it while he was near. And he had remembered. Listen, Mommy. Benjamin's face was illuminated with delight. It sounds like the song you sing when I cannot sleep. Nora's throat tightened. She took the music box from Benjamin's hands, examining it for any identifying marks, finding none. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly custom work. Someone had spent considerable time and money creating this specific gift. Do you like it? Benjamin asked anxiously, misreading her expression. Nora forced herself to smile. It is beautiful. Do you like it? I love it. Can I keep it in my room? I can listen to it when I have bad dreams. Of course you can. She let Benjamin take the music box upstairs while she stood in the kitchen, processing what had just happened. Victor had sent a gift that demonstrated intimate knowledge of her history, of the songs that comforted her, of the things that mattered. He had done so anonymously, making no demands, expecting no acknowledgement. Just a gift from the shadows, a gesture of connection he knew he had no right to claim. Walter appeared in the doorway, having watched the scene unfold. You know who sent it, he said. Yes. Are you angry? Nora considered the question carefully. I do not know what I am. He remembered something I did not know he noticed. He sent something meaningful without asking for credit. That is not the behavior of someone performing transformation for personal gain. It might be the behavior of someone genuinely trying to change, Walter suggested gently. Or it might be manipulation I cannot recognize because I still do not understand what he wants. What if what he wants is simply to give his son a birthday gift without being able to be present? Nora had no answer. She watched through the kitchen window as Benjamin ran into the garden, music box temporarily forgotten in favor of birthday adventures with the neighbor's children. Her son was happy, healthy, thriving in ways that owed nothing to Victor Brennan's money or influence. But he was also missing something. A father. A complete understanding of where he came from. The music box had arrived to fill a gap Benjamin did not know existed, and Nora was not certain whether to be grateful or furious. That evening, after the party had ended and Benjamin was exhausted from celebration, Nora sat beside his bed while the music box played softly on his nightstand. "Mommy," Benjamin said sleepily. "Do I have a daddy?" The question was not new. He had asked variations of it before, and Nora had deflected with careful non-answers about different kinds of families. But something about this birthday, this gift, made the question feel different. More urgent. More deserving of truth. "Yes," Nora said quietly. "You have a biological father." Benjamin's eyes opened wider. "Where is he?" "He lives far away. We do not have contact with him." "Why not?" Nora stroked her son's hair, buying time while she formulated words that were honest without being damaging. "Before you were born, he made mistakes. Serious mistakes that hurt me very badly. We separated because of those mistakes, and I chose to raise you on my own." Benjamin processed this with the gravity of a child confronting complicated adult information. "Is he a bad person?" Nora thought about Victor's letters she had not answered. His respectful distance during professional consultations. The music box that proved he remembered things she had forgotten sharing. The reports of his charitable donations and restorative justice work. "He was a person who did something very wrong," she said finally. "People can change. I do not know if he has changed. But what he did hurt me enough that I was not willing to find out." Benjamin was quiet for a moment. "If he changed, would he want to meet me?" Nora's heart clenched. "I think he would want that very much. But wanting something does not mean deserving it. He would have to prove he has truly become different, and that would take a long time." "How long?" "I do not know. Years, maybe." Benjamin nodded slowly, accepting this with the pragmatism children sometimes display when adults expect emotional chaos. "Okay. Can you tell me if he proves it?" "I can try." She kissed his forehead and left him drifting towards sleep, the music box still playing its gentle melody. In the hallway, she pressed her back against the wall and allowed herself to feel the weight of what she had just promised. She had told Benjamin she would tell him if Victor proved he had changed. That meant she had to keep observing. Keep evaluating. Keep allowing Victor close enough to assess his transformation while maintaining enough distance to protect them both. It was an impossible balance. But for her son, she would attempt it. The second year of restoration brought unexpected developments. Victor's vineyard continued improving, the blight retreating according to Nora's projections. Her quarterly visits became routine, professional interactions that covered soil chemistry and growth rates and treatment adjustments. Victor remained respectful, cooperative, entirely focused on the work at hand. But he also continued changing in ways that could not be ignored. He sold his family's art collection, pieces worth millions that had been displayed in the estate for generations. The proceeds went to establishing a foundation supporting agricultural workers' families in crisis. He publicly credited Nora's work as the inspiration, noting that his restoration had taught him how much could be rebuilt when someone with expertise invested their skills in recovery. He enrolled in a master's program in social work, attending classes between estate management duties. When colleagues asked why he was pursuing such a different path, he explained that he wanted to understand how to help people who had been harmed by those with power over them. He wanted to learn how to make amends in ways that were actually useful rather than performative. He wrote articles that were published in regional business journals, essays about accountability and inherited privilege and the dangers of unchecked family loyalty. He never named Nora or described their specific history, but anyone who knew the situation could read between the lines. He was publicly chronicling his failures and his efforts to become different. Nora collected these reports without commenting on them. She filed them away in a mental folder labeled evidence, uncertain whether they proved genuine transformation or simply sophisticated reputation management. People with resources could manufacture any appearance they chose. She had learned that lesson too thoroughly to forget. But she also could not entirely dismiss the accumulation of consistent behavior over time. Victor had maintained his boundaries for 2 years. He had made no attempts to circumvent her restrictions on Benjamin. He had responded to her professional coldness with patient acceptance rather than resentful pushing. If this was performance, it was extraordinary committed performance. And she was finding it increasingly difficult to believe anyone could sustain such an act for so long without genuine underlying change. Benjamin turned 6 and then 7, growing from a curious child into a thoughtful boy with his mother's observational skills and his father's stubborn determination to understand how things worked. He asked about his father occasionally, accepting Nora's careful answers with patience that seemed beyond his years. But his questions were evolving. "Mom," he said one evening while working on a school project, "do you think my father knows I exist?" Nora set down the dish she was drying, giving the question the attention it deserved. "Yes. He knows. Does he ever ask about me? He respects my decision to keep our lives separate. But I believe he would like to know you if circumstances were different." Benjamin considered this, his pencil paused over his homework. What would make circumstances different? Trust. Nora sat down across from him. "I would need to trust that he has genuinely become a person who would be good for you to know. And building that trust would take a very long time." "How much time?" "Years. Many years." Benjamin nodded slowly. "Is he trying to build that trust?" The question stopped Nora cold. She realized she had been thinking of Victor's transformation as something he was doing for himself, or perhaps for some abstract sense of redemption. She had not considered that he might be consciously trying to demonstrate trustworthiness. That every charitable donation and educational program and respectful boundary might be evidence submitted for her evaluation. "I think he might be," she admitted. "I think he might be trying very hard." Benjamin returned to his homework, apparently satisfied with this answer. But his question lingered in Nora's mind long after he was in bed. Was Victor trying to build trust? And if he was, how would she know when enough trust had accumulated to justify changing the boundaries she had established? She did not have answers. But for the first time since that night in the rain, she recognized that answers might eventually be necessary. The final restoration assessment occurred at the end of the third year. Nora walked the vineyard rows with her associate, documenting the recovery that had exceeded her projections. The vines were healthy, the soil balanced, the fruit developing with quality that would produce exceptional wine within seasons. The Brennan legacy had been saved, preserved through her expertise despite everything its owner had done to her. Victor waited at the hillside overlook where she had first outlined treatment protocols, watching her approach with an expression she could not quite read. "The results are excellent," she said, keeping her voice professionally neutral. "Your vineyard has recovered beyond projected outcomes. My team's work here is essentially complete, though I recommend ongoing maintenance protocols for the next 2 seasons." "Thank you," Victor said quietly. "You saved my family's legacy. Everything my great-grandparents built is still standing because of you. I saved interesting agricultural heritage." Nora allowed herself to meet his eyes. "Your family's legacy includes more than vineyards. It includes cruelty and fabrication and the willingness to destroy innocent people for petty grievances. That remains your responsibility to address." Victor nodded slowly. "I have been trying to address it. Every day for 3 years. I have given away money I inherited to causes that might help people like you. I have educated myself about harm and accountability. I have written publicly about my failures without naming you because your privacy matters more than my need for confession. I have maintained every boundary you established even when it felt like dying slowly." Nora studied him, searching for performance, for manipulation, for anything that would justify maintaining the certainty she had cultivated for so long. She found only exhaustion and sincerity and a desperate hope he was clearly trying to conceal. "Why?" she heard herself ask. "Why all of this? What do you actually want?" Victor's expression crumpled slightly before he rebuilt it. "I want to deserve a second chance. Not to receive one. Just to deserve one. I want to become the kind of person who would never have believed Margot's lies in the first place. I want to wake up in the morning without hating myself for what I did to you." "And what about Benjamin?" Victor looked away, toward the vineyard rows they had both worked to save. "I think about him every day. I imagine what he looks like now, what his voice sounds like, what he cares about. I dream about moments I will never have, first steps and first words and first days of school." He paused, his voice rough. "I know I have no right to any of it. I know the documents I signed mean I can never claim connection to him. But wanting something and deserving something are different, and I have accepted that I may never deserve what I want." Nora stood in silence for a long moment, processing his words against everything she knew about him, everything she had observed over 3 years of professional interaction. "He asks about you," she said finally. Victor's head turned sharply, his eyes suddenly bright with emotion he could not contain. "Benjamin. He asks questions about his father. He wants to know if you have changed. He wants to know if you think about him." Victor pressed a hand against his chest as if physically containing something that threatened to escape. What do you tell him? I tell him the truth. That you made terrible mistakes. That people can change. That I do not know yet if you have changed enough. And what would enough look like? Nora considered the question, recognizing that her answer would shape everything that followed. Enough would look like time. More time. Enough would look like continued respect for every boundary I establish. Enough would look like proving through years of consistent action that you understand what you did and have genuinely become different. Not performing difference. Being different. Victor nodded slowly. How many years? I do not know. Maybe I will never know. Maybe this will always be uncertain and you will have to accept that uncertainty as the permanent condition of your life. I accept it, Victor said immediately. Whatever terms you set, whatever timeline you need, I accept it completely. They stood together on the hillside, overlooking the vineyard Nora had saved and the distance that remained between them. The autumn light was golden, painting everything with warmth that belied the complexity of the moment. There is something else, Nora said. Benjamin made a family tree for school. He asked if he could include you on it. Victor's breath caught audibly. What did you tell him? I told him he could decide for himself who counts as family. He left a branch with your name on it, labeled as someone he might meet someday. Victor turned away, and Nora saw his shoulders shaking with emotion he was trying to conceal. She waited, giving him time to compose himself. When he turned back, his eyes were red but his voice was steady. I would do anything to deserve being on that tree. Anything. I would wait forever if that is what you needed. I would spend the rest of my life proving I have changed if you would just give me the chance. Nora looked at this man who had murdered her trust in love and then spent years trying to resurrect something from the ashes. She thought about Walter's words regarding walls that became prisons. She thought about Benjamin's questions and his patience and his willingness to consider possibilities she had foreclosed. I am not ready, she said. I may never be ready. But I am willing to consider that someday I might be. Victor nodded, accepting this sliver of hope without demanding more. That is enough. That is more than I deserve. They walked back toward the estate building separately, maintaining the distance that had defined their interaction for 3 years. But something had shifted in the space between them. Not reconciliation. Not forgiveness. Just the first tentative acknowledgement that the future might hold something other than permanent separation. The first meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon, 6 months after the restoration completed. Nora spent the morning preparing Benjamin with age-appropriate explanations of what was happening. She told him that the person they were meeting was his biological father. She told him that Victor had made serious mistakes years ago, but had spent a long time trying to become better. She told him that this meeting was just a beginning, that building any kind of relationship would take much more time and many more conversations. Benjamin listened with characteristic gravity. Is he nervous? Benjamin asked. I imagine he is terrified, Nora admitted. Me too, Benjamin confessed. A little bit. But mostly I am curious. That is a good way to feel about it. Victor arrived precisely on time, his hands trembling slightly as Nora opened the door. He was dressed simply, nothing ostentatious, nothing that might intimidate a 7-year-old. He carried a small wrapped gift that Nora examined before allowing inside. A book. Astronomy for young readers. He asked me once what he was interested in, Victor explained, his voice barely steady. In one of the reports from the vineyard visits, you mentioned he was fascinated by stars. I thought maybe this could be something we both learn about. Nora nodded slowly and stepped aside to let him enter. Benjamin waited in the living room, standing near the couch where Nora had positioned him. He looked impossibly small and impossibly brave, studying Victor with the same analytical intensity Nora recognized from her own face in mirrors. Victor stopped in the doorway, overwhelmed by the sight of his son for the first time. Tears gathered in his eyes, though he fought to contain them. Hello, Benjamin said. Mom says you are my biological father. Victor nodded, apparently unable to speak. She says you made serious mistakes and hurt her very badly. She says you have been trying to become a better person for a long time. Victor cleared his throat. All of that is true, he managed. I did terrible things because I believed lies instead of trusting someone who loved me. I was a coward and I hurt your mother when I should have protected her. I have spent years trying to understand what I did wrong and how to become someone different. Benjamin considered this information with disturbing maturity. Why did you believe the lies? Because I was scared, Victor admitted. I was afraid of being wrong, afraid of looking foolish, afraid of trusting my own judgment. So when someone I was supposed to trust told me terrible things about your mother, I believed them because believing was easier than questioning. That sounds like a very bad decision. It was the worst decision I ever made. Benjamin nodded slowly, apparently satisfied with this response. Mom says building trust takes years. She says you have to prove through actions, not just words. Is that true? Yes. Victor's voice was steadier now, focused on his son rather than his own emotions. I cannot prove anything to you today except that I am here and I want to listen. Everything else will take time. Okay, Benjamin said. Do you want to see my room? I have a poster of the solar system. Victor looked at Nora, seeking permission. She nodded slightly, and Victor followed his son upstairs while Nora remained in the living room, listening to their voices through the floor above. She could not hear specific words, just the rhythm of conversation, Benjamin's higher voice asking questions and Victor's lower voice responding carefully. No tension in the tones. No distress. Just two people beginning the slow process of knowing each other. Walter appeared from the kitchen, where he had been staying out of sight but within reach. How does it feel? He asked quietly. Nora considered the question. Like standing on ground that might crumble. But also like watching something grow that I did not plant. Growth is always uncertain, Walter observed. But refusing to allow it means choosing death over life. The visit lasted 90 minutes. When Victor came back downstairs with Benjamin, both of them looked slightly dazed, as if they had experienced something neither fully understood. Thank you, Victor said to Nora, his voice rough with contained emotion. For this chance. For every chance. Do not thank me yet, Nora replied. This is a beginning, not an ending. We will see what comes next. Victor nodded and said goodbye to Benjamin, who waved from the doorway as Victor walked to his car. Nora watched through the window as Victor sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, not moving, apparently processing everything that had just happened. Mom, Benjamin said from behind her. He seems sad. Nora turned to look at her son. He has many reasons to be sad. He missed years with you that he can never get back. But he is here now. Benjamin's voice held that particular clarity children sometimes achieve. That counts for something, does it not? Yes, Nora admitted. That counts for something. The visits continued monthly, then bi-weekly, then weekly as trust accumulated in slow increments. Victor never pushed for more than Nora offered. He never asked for time alone with Benjamin. He never tried to undermine her authority or create a competing relationship. He simply showed up, consistently, patiently, bringing books and curiosity and the kind of attention that Benjamin had never received from a father figure before. Walter observed the evolution with quiet satisfaction. He is doing the work, Walter commented one evening after Victor had left. Real work, not performance. I know, Nora acknowledged. I am trying to figure out what to do with that knowledge. You could start by letting yourself feel something other than wariness. Feeling got me destroyed once. Wariness has kept me safe. Safe is not the same as alive, Walter replied gently. And Benjamin needs a mother who knows the difference. 1 year after that first meeting, Nora agreed to have dinner with Victor. Just the two of them, while Benjamin spent the evening with Walter. They went to a restaurant neither had been to before, neutral territory without memories attached. The conversation was awkward at first, stilted by years of maintained distance. But gradually, something shifted. Victor told her about his social work studies, about the clients he hoped to help, about learning to see his own privilege as a tool for service rather than entitlement. Nora found herself talking about the early years of her business, about the struggle she had concealed behind professional confidence, about the night she had wondered if she was strong enough to keep going. She told him things she had never told anyone except Walter, vulnerabilities she had guarded like precious resources. By the end of the evening, something had changed between them. Not romance. Not forgiveness. Something harder to name. Recognition. Perhaps. Acknowledgement that they had both survived something terrible and emerged as different people. I am not ready to be your partner, Nora said as Victor walked her to her car. I do not know if I will ever be ready for that. I understand, Victor replied. I am not asking for partnership. I am just asking if you think someday, maybe in more years, we might look at each other and see possibility instead of only pain. Nora considered the question carefully. Ask me again in another year. Maybe I will have an answer. Victor nodded, accepting this uncertainty as the best outcome he could hope for. He opened her car door and waited while she got in. Before she pulled away, she looked up at him one more time. You have changed, she said. I did not want to believe it, but I believe it now. Victor's expression softened with something like peace. Thank you. That means more than you can possibly know. Nora drove home through quiet streets, processing everything that had transpired over dinner, over years. She was not ready for romance. She might never be ready. But she was no longer certain that the walls she had built were worth maintaining at any cost. Benjamin asked about the dinner as soon as she walked through the door. How was it? Did you fight? No fighting, Nora assured him. We talked about a lot of things. It went better than I expected. Benjamin's face lit up. Does that mean he can come to my birthday party next month? Nora looked at her son, at the hope in his eyes that mirrored something she was only beginning to feel herself. Yes, she said. He can come to your birthday party. Benjamin cheered and ran to tell Walter the news. Nora stood in the doorway of her home, looking out at the evening sky, feeling something unfamiliar and fragile taking root in her chest. It was not forgiveness. It was not love. It was simply the recognition that the future did not have to look like the past. That walls could have doors. That strength included the courage to let someone prove they had changed. She did not know what would come next. She did not know if Victor would ultimately earn the trust he was working so hard to build. She did not know if her heart would ever fully heal from the wounds he had inflicted. But for the first time in 8 years, she was willing to find out. The party was held in Nora's garden on a bright September afternoon. Benjamin ran between guests with the boundless energy of childhood, playing games, eating cake, demonstrating for anyone who would listen the telescope Victor had given him as a birthday gift. Victor stayed near the periphery, participating when invited but never inserting himself, respecting boundaries even in celebration. Nora watched from the porch, Walter beside her. You have come a long way, Walter observed. Both of you. We have a longer way to go. True. But you are walking in the right direction. That matters. Victor approached them, hesitant, seeking permission to join their conversation. Nora nodded slightly, and he climbed the porch steps to stand beside them. Thank you for including me, he said. This is more than I ever expected to have. Do not thank me, Nora replied. Thank Benjamin. He wanted you here. Then I am grateful to him. And to you for allowing it. They stood together watching Benjamin play, 3 adults connected by complicated history and uncertain future, choosing to exist in the same space despite everything that had come before. The evening light turned golden, painting the garden in warm hues. Benjamin's laughter rose above the other sounds, pure and uncomplicated, the joy of a child who did not yet understand how rare such moments of peace could be. Mom, Benjamin called, running toward the porch. Victor, watch this. He demonstrated some trick involving a ball and complicated footwork, probably learned from friends at school. Nora and Victor both watched, both applauded, both smiled at the same moment without planning to. Their eyes met over Benjamin's head, and something passed between them. Not love, not yet, maybe not ever. But possibility. The acknowledgement that what had been destroyed might, with enough time and effort, transform into something new. Nora looked away first, returning her attention to her son. But she did not ask Victor to leave. She did not rebuild the walls that had been slowly dismantling for years. She simply let the moment exist, uncertain and fragile and somehow more precious for its impermanence. Some stories end with resolution, with clear answers and definite conclusions. This story does not end that way. This story ends with a woman who was destroyed and rebuilt herself into something stronger than she was before. It ends with a man who destroyed her and spent years becoming someone worthy of a chance he might never receive. It ends with a child who grew up knowing he was loved, even when that love came from unexpected sources. It ends with possibility rather than certainty. With doors that might or might not be opened. With the recognition that forgiveness is not a destination but a journey, and some journeys last the rest of our lives. Nora never promised Victor anything beyond consideration. He never asked for more than she was willing to give. Benjamin never demanded that his parents reconcile, only that they both be present in his life in whatever form that presence could take. And perhaps that was enough. Perhaps the ending was not the point. Perhaps the point was the willingness to begin again, to try again, to believe that people could change even when evidence suggested otherwise. Perhaps the point was simply this, that love, when it is real, can survive destruction. Not unchanged. Not unscathed. But somehow, impossibly, still alive. And still growing.